What's up, everyone? This is the day after FanFest. The last day was Saturday, Party Top the World. I am Laz, and with me is CCP Fozzie. And so we're just going to go into what he does and some of the upcoming changes to the game. So, tell us a little about yourself.
All right, I'm CCP Fozzie. I'm a game designer working on EVE with Team 5.0. I work on kind of a number of different issues. A lot of the stuff that people kind of publicly see me working on is ship and module balance, and work on a lot of systems design. Two of the systems that actually we're working on right now with my team are corps and alliances and sovereignty, and so we're very heavily involved in both of those at the moment.
Right. So when you're working on a particular system in the game, is it just you who puts input on it, or is it other members of your team and other people from other teams? Do the other teams actually see what you're working on as well?
Yep, so there's a number of ways that we work with kind of a whole team to do our designs. It's never just one person. So the teams themselves are involved with every aspect of anything we do. We work on whole team quality, so everyone on the team has input in the designs, everyone on the team helps test, and everyone on the team gives feedback kind of along the process. And the teams are interdisciplinary, so we have designers, usually a couple different designers of different specialties, QA programmers, and a wide enough kind of spread that we can cover a lot of different issues with each team. And then we also work with the rest of the game designers, so the entire kind of game design discipline meets regularly and goes over designs, it gives feedback and has reviews. And then also we put up our designs and reviews for feedback to the whole company on our internal wiki as well, so plenty of interested people can go in and give their feedback as well at that point.
Right. So the SOV changes is kind of the biggest thing you're working on right now, and it's slated to come out in, I believe, June?
Yes, we're currently planning on June and the early June release as the target for that.
Okay, so that can move depending on how much more time is needed.
Yep, there's things that we can do beforehand and things that could get pushed back depending on how kind of things run. We've already announced a couple of changes related to SOV that we're actually going to be releasing earlier in April. One change to nullsec mining, where we're going to be updating all the nullsec ores to allow more self-sufficiency and increased yield in nullsec. And another change that's going to allow people to deploy and upgrade iHubs more easily by lowering the volumes and allowing you to manufacture the iHub upgrades locally, so you don't have to buy them all from NPCs.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest concerns. I don't know if you actually watched the Meta Show, but we had a big discussion on that, I believe, 2 weeks ago with Pro God Legend, about just how the amount of time and logistical work it takes to move an iHub with a freighter and Titans and Phoebe jump fatigue. And
yeah, we've been very carefully looking at a lot of feedback from a lot of different areas, talking to the CSM, talking to players directly, ever since we started this kind of SOV process. And these are kind of two of the areas that we've decided we can kind of make concrete steps in April to help alleviate some of those concerns.
Yeah, and I'm actually really excited with the upcoming changes because, as you know, nullsec is somewhat stagnant right now, and especially with the amount of nullsec representatives on the CSM this year. So I think there will be a lot of good people there who can help implement it on the changes as you guys showed them.
Yeah, I've worked very closely with a bunch of different CSMs since I started at CCP, and I look forward to working with CSMX as well.
Yeah. So the SOV changes, what kind of puts you onto this set of changes, like the whole constellation and control points and just capturing the different systems?
Yep, so when we were looking at the kind of nullsec and SOV ecosystem as a whole and trying to decide what to work on next, we ended up zeroing in on the capture system itself. This is an area of the system that hasn't been significantly touched since 2009, while a lot of other areas like the quality of outposts for manufacturing were changed in Creus and Odyssey, we changed moon minerals, we changed mining. So those have been touched at least more recently and are in a bit better shape. The capture system is just very old at this point and is causing a lot of problems. So we decided that would be the next step to tackle. And with that, we knew we had a bunch of different priorities that we needed to hit. We needed to create a system that was more exciting for kind of all the people involved. We needed a system that spread out fights to help reduce load and create a better experience with less tie-dye, ideally. We wanted a system that opened up some new tactics and that made it a lot easier to defend lived in space, but harder to defend empty space.
Okay. And one of the biggest concerns that I've had personally is the ability to camp stations throughout that prime time, or not prime time, the Freeport time. So if you lose the first timer and the station becomes a Freeport where the hostiles can dock or an undock can come and go, how do you guys see that going if with larger forces just camping that undocked where those people can't evac and they can't come and go?
I mean, if you want to camp it for the whole time, it's quite a bit of effort to have that continuous camp. We've seen it done before. I don't expect it's going to happen kind of in all cases by any means. The way we look at the Freeport mode, in a lot of ways, it's a extra step after the station would have normally flipped. Where we wanted to create a system, the actual original spark for what led to the Freeport mode and the second capture event where everyone's fighting on their own and there's no kind of defender or attacker team, is that we knew that last hitting was a really bad mechanic for deciding who has ownership. So the capture mechanic system of defenders versus everybody else works great for structures that were going to explode at the end. But with Outpost, we needed a way to determine who was going to have control of it. So we decided actually to have that second event. First thing you do is knock it into open mode, where it's like an NPC station, and then after that you can capture it. Definitely living in that Freeport station, evacuating things is going to be a lot more challenging than it would be if you had control of docking the station. But I think people have a lot of experience with what it's like to live in NPC stations, for instance, and a lot of the same tactics of trying to keep your ships as much as possible out of the station to avoid getting camped in, spreading out across multiple stations, multiple locations, star bases, are all going to be very important.
Okay. Yeah, and the way current nullsec works with coalitions and everything is a lot of times during wartime they will have a dedicated system where they stage everything.
Yep.
So it will, I guess, in my opinion, it will kind of force people to, or not really force people, but it would give a more tactical reason to try and headshot a system early. Yep,
and then in response to that, it'll give a more tactical reason for people to spread out a little bit as well and potentially operate out of a couple of different systems or operate out of more heavily out of star bases rather than relying entirely on the station. Yeah.
So yeah, it should be really interesting. I'm looking forward to it. I think it has a great potential to pick up the game and create more fights, and it also has a lot of other potential.
Yeah.
As in, it could go wrong, and well, I don't think it will. I think he has being able to give it enough time before you release and going and let people know we will push the time back if we need to.
Yep.
And I think that's a big thing, and people are kind of more confident about it, being that you guys are taking the time to look at it.
Yeah, we're very committed to getting these changes right. Of course, you'll never be able to predict all the outcomes, and that's something that CCP Seagull has talked about before. We're, as much as possible, actually trying to avoid making changes where we know all the outcomes, and instead pushing things towards a bit more chaos and unpredictability for everyone involved, including us. And we hope that that'll be a good roller coaster ride for everyone involved.
Yeah, well, as an EVE player, I can say we will try to break it as quickly as possible.
Oh, I'd expect nothing else.
So, also part of your job, I don't know if it's actually part of your team or if it's just a side project, ship balancing.
Yep, I mean, so that's a project that's ongoing that multiple teams are involved with. My team does quite a bit of it, so does Team Power Unicorns, and it's kind of spread out across a couple of different teams because it's such a kind of a large continuous project. But yeah, we're always working on that. We've got a patch coming out just on Tuesday called Scylla, where we're making some pretty significant balance changes. We're making changes to the Ishtar, to medium railguns, to sentry drones, to Skynet fighter carriers, and that is a set of changes that we've worked very closely with the community, with the CSM to source.
Okay. So you mentioned the Ishtar, and that's a huge point of conflict right now. Is a lot of people don't think the Ishtar changes go far enough. One of the major issues with the Ishtar is the amount of tracking they get with the sentry drones. Have you guys considered changing that as well as the damage decrease? I
mean, I won't ever rule anything out like that. It's very possible we could. In general, actually, people saying your changes don't go far enough makes us pretty happy because that means that we're taking advantage of our faster iteration cycle. It's better to make a smaller change, see what happens, and go from there than to kind of swing wildly and over-nerf things. So this change is a very significant change. It's a significant decrease in DPS. And we like the fact in general that higher tracking is a benefit of these weapon systems at the expense of other things. The real goal is to make sure that the whole ecosystem is balanced, so that the weapon system as a whole is balanced, which doesn't necessarily mean that there's any one aspect that needs to be nerfed, because you could nerf other things as well to keep it distinct from others.
Okay.
So it's very possible we could nerf tracking, but also if this doesn't go far enough, we could also nerf other areas, for instance.
And one of the other biggest points of contention that I've heard about the Ishtars is the amount of fitting that's allotted to the Ishtar. It's so huge, and you don't really need to fill the high slots with the things that would suck up that power grid, where you can oversized afterburners onto the Ishtars. And basically they're able to do the same thing as MWD Ishtars, where they sit at 100K with drop drones, but with oversized afterburners, which means they're going to actually dodge a lot of the damage that's going to be coming in.
Yep, I mean that's something, of course, we're always keeping an eye on. But like I said, there's always a lot of aspects of any individual ship that when we look at, and fitting is just one of them. So I wouldn't say we necessarily need to reduce the fitting on it, but yeah, there's all of those things are all potential options for changes in the future.
Okay. So I guess another general balancing question is when you guys go about, or as in when CCP goes about redesigning these ships and rebalancing them, do they take into account just nullsec, or how nullsec with larger numbers going to use them, or do they actually look at the entire game?
We look at all kinds of different usage. For quite a lot of ships, even though nullsec might be the area where they're kind of most famous, the actual average player uses them much more elsewhere. So we want to keep kind of all the usage in mind, which is often a challenge because often the way people use it in different areas of space is quite different. But yeah, we definitely don't ever zero in just on one and make changes just for one area of space.
Okay. And also with skill, there comes the, I guess, nerf to medium railguns.
Yep.
And what made CCP, yourself and the other game designers, decide that nerfing the railgun was a better solution than actual nerfing the actual ship that's been most commonly used with it?
In practice, it's because for two reasons. One is that there's a number of ships that are all very strong connected with medium railguns. The Tango, of course, is the most famous, but the Moa and the Eagle are also very strong. The Vulture is also very strong. And all of these ships went kind of the place where these started to become issues balance-wise wasn't when we made changes to any of the individual ships. It was when we buffed the railguns themselves. So we went back to the actual source of, okay, it looks like when we made the increase, we pushed it a bit too far. That's fine. We pull it back a little bit. So medium railguns are still much better than they were before we made the last big set of changes to them, but now they're a little bit more moderated.
Okay. So with the new modules, capital ships, super capitals, has CCP looked into, or do they have any of the ideas that they're able to put out now that they're possibly thinking about implementing, like a rebalance or repurposing?
So we said at FanFest and in some of our earlier blogs, we are very committed to, really it is a repurposing of especially supercaps. Right now there's a number of roles that they do really well, especially capital killers, but the challenge is that if you don't have other reasons to bring them out, then there's a chicken and egg problem. No one brings them out to be killed. So they really do need a complete reimagining in a lot of ways. And that's a process that we're diving into basically right now. We're committed to working on. We're going to be listening to players and working with you guys in the future for that. We don't have stuff we're ready to talk about yet. There's a number of ideas that have been bounced around on some general directions. I mentioned before that we like the idea of adding some new capabilities for allowing them to do powerful, cool effects in a lot of ways, like expanding on the remote ECM burst that the supercarrier already has, in addition to their damage killing abilities. But yeah, we need to find a place where they're strong and powerful and exciting without being blat machines for subcaps. And that's going to be the big challenge going ahead in this year.
Yeah, I think you guys just really have to look at the numbers of them that are in the game now. Is I think what really adds the fact that it's so hard to rebalance because there's always going to be more and more and more.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, this is a problem that's been essentially the same ever since the beginning. One of the big mistakes that was made when supercaps were introduced was that people tried to imagine some kind of limit on the number that would be there without actually implementing a limit on them. What you need to look at isn't the number of ships that exist in the game. You need to look at the number of potential ships that could exist in the game, which has been infinite for these ships from day one. And so it's the same problem that if we were rebalancing them properly, redesigning them properly 5 years ago, we'd have the same challenges that we have today. Because when it comes down to it, players will always make more.
Well, in regards to capital ships, jump fatigue, how do you feel that has gone?
Overall, we think it's been very successful. It's done a really good job of allowing people to engage with capitals without being dropped down from all across the map. It's created much more regionalism, so we're very happy with that. There's some areas where it's kind of hit a bit harder than might have been needed, especially with ships like Black Ops, but we're committed to working on those.
Oh, and when it comes to the SOV changes and SOV in general, jump bridges and their relation to jump fatigue, do you feel that is an appropriate balance, or do you think maybe the amount of jump fatigue caused by jump bridges maybe should be scaled slightly, just to add more of a benefit to having the SOV and being able to control these jump bridges.
I mean, it's something we can always investigate, especially if we make more changes to the infrastructure behind them, potentially separate them off from star bases, make them into their own structures, that kind of thing in the future. But it is important to remember that the Phoebe jump changes weren't just for capital power projection, they were for general power projection. Player movement is a very powerful tool in the game, whether it's with capitals or with subcaps. And so we never want to ignore one area of the game in that way. We need to make sure that's always under control.
Okay. Yeah, and just one of the major contentions with sovereignty is getting value out of all the work that it takes to actually maintain and hold SOV. And I think that's the biggest part of the game that is lacking is why do I take more space when the space I already have, I'm not really getting too much from it.
Yep, at the end of the day, we're committed to making sure that SOV space is valuable and desirable. I think there probably will always be a bit of a disagreement between us and anyone living in any area of space about how much money they should make. Every wormholers will tell us they should be making more money. High sectors will tell us they should be making more money. Low sectors will tell us they should make more money. And it's one of the challenges with balancing an entire economy is that we have to find a way to give good incentives and good risk for reward for all areas of space, keeping the entire thing in mind, which means nobody gets everything they want, but we still think we can find a very good balance.
Okay. Yeah. Well, listen, I think personally that I should have all the money instead than everyone else, but
I hear that from a lot of players. Okay. Yeah, I think that statement right there is one that almost anyone can agree on. So we found a good kind of rock to balance on.
All right. Yes. Yeah. So instead of we're just balancing everything, we're just give us the money.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm okay with this. All right. So I guess otherwise SOV changes. Do you think the way that the constellations are currently mapped out, do you think they'll change? Because if you look at the constellations in different regions in EVE, a lot of the constellations have a singular choke point into that system. So if a fleet forms up early and is able to block off that one choke point, then you're therefore forced to jump into them, and if you're jumping into a huge force, you can't really split up those numbers.
Yep.
And with Phoebe and jump fatigue and moving Titans, it's become a lot harder to actually attack space because it's so much of an issue to move Titans from place to place right now.
Yep. I mean, it is still very doable. You guys proved that very well with getting a whole bunch of Titans down to Fountain. But one thing I'll say is that we're actually very happy for there to be good, strong geography considerations when people are choosing what their strategies can be for attacking an area. Choke points are something that's very valuable for that. They create really interesting choices. And you do still have the tools, like you can have the ability to use Titan bridges to get across areas. You have the ability to use Black Ops bridges to get across choke points. And also, we expect that with the entire constellation mattering more, people who want to attack a defended constellation will need to start doing the kind of things that you see in areas like wormhole space, where you try to find a good spot for a POS and set up actual locations throughout the constellation where you can stage ships, where you can have good safe spot POSes, and making that kind of larger scale infrastructure for the invasion of each constellation matter.
Okay, so I guess the end goal is to try to force more tactical, more strategic thinking, more preparation.
Yes, indeed. It also means that once you start getting the foothold in a constellation, if you can take one station in a constellation, it helps with the others. So there's actually a bit more of a flow to the battle for each constellation.
Okay, yeah. So playing EVE and taking SOV in space already takes up an immense amount of time.
Yep.
Are you concerned with the amount of tactical and strategic implications that you're hoping to imply onto taking SOV? You think it's going to increase the amount of time that people have to spend on the game? And because, like I said, it already takes a lot of time to actually take SOV.
Yep, in general, what we want is more time that's spent doing interesting things like thinking and planning and fighting, and less time spent doing boring things like grinding hit points with no one challenging you. And we think there's a lot of room to decrease the negative wastage of time while giving you more fun time in game.
All right. Well, I think that's a lot of the questions that I had, and thanks for hanging out with me.
Thank you.
We had a little bit of an audio issue, but we'll work through it in post editing. And I think Other than that, do you have any questions for me, or want to say anything to the players?
To say thank you to everyone that came to FanFest. We had a really great time. Thank you to everyone who has been giving us feedback on the soft changes, people that have been posting on the forums, that have been making blogs and podcasts and TV shows and all of that, and everyone who's been filling out our survey on time zone issues with SOV. We're very, very thankful for all that feedback. It's been really useful so far, and it's going to continue to be very useful.
All right, and with that, we'll go ahead and close it down. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm Laz, CCP Fozzie, and we'll see you on the next video.